I think what makes hackers different from everybody else is resilience and our willingness to not give up and not say, oh, this shit doesn't compile, so fuck this shit, I'm going to watch Netflix. But actually figuring it out and making it work, right? And I think that sets us apart. As in, that's what makes us different. As in, that's what makes hackers different, right? Is that not giving up, resilience.
In this episode of the Phosphorus IoT Security Podcast, I'm joined by Dhillon Kannabhiran, and we discuss cybersecurity conferences in the Middle East and Asia, as well as discussing cybersecurity research and cybersecurity community. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Phosphorus IoT Security Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dhillon Kannabhiran. Dhillon and I have been connected on social media for many years. I think we originally connected on Twitter, now rebranded as X. And I got to speak at his Hack in the Box conference in Singapore back in 2022, the first time we actually got to meet in person. So it's an honor to have you join us today, and welcome to the show, Dhillon.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having me. Always a privilege, always fun. Yeah.
Great to virtually see you. It's been too long since the last time. I've got to get out to one of your conferences again.
Yeah, man, time flies, right? When you're having fun. So, but yeah, I can't.
It does, definitely.
You just mentioned 2022, and I'm like, was it really that long ago? Doesn't feel like it, but yeah, time's really gone by, man.
It was crazy too, because this was still, we still had COVID to deal with, because I remember when I was there that you had the week after I left is when they removed the mask mandate. So
yes,
had to, yeah,
man. Yeah, COVID's a bad word, you know what I mean? It's a time that we all want to forget, but like, yeah, there's there's a distinction between BC, before COVID, and like AC, I guess, but yeah, 2022 was, yeah, you're right. It was still in the mask mandate, social distancing, sanitize your hands. But yeah, interesting times that we live through, right? Like,
yeah, definitely good to have that behind us now. So, so some of the folks that may not know who you are, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling the listeners about your background.
Sure. Yeah, so basically we run this small little conference called Hack in the Box. We've been around for like 20 something years. I always say we're similar to Black Hat and DEF CON, except we're in Asia. So we started out in Malaysia in like 2002, 2003. We've done events since then in like the Middle East. So we were in Dubai and Abu Dhabi for a couple of years. We've then expanded to Europe. And yeah, so it's been like 20, 22, 23 years, something like that, like a long time that like I've had so much gray hair. I didn't have this much gray hair when I started, but this is what happens when you run conferences.
Yeah,
it shuts you out.
Yeah, it's usually people's children that give them the gray hair.
Yeah, I have attendees to worry about and speakers, which are like children also, I suppose. But it's like, yeah, a different set of problems.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is you really operate a high quality conference, because one of the things I was really amazed, it's still one of the best conferences I've spoken at. I was amazed at the artwork on the stage. The audio and video setup was like really very nice. I mean, I remember, because yeah, it was pretty amazing. I was really impressed, especially considering it wasn't like a really huge conference, but just the level of quality of the conference all the way through. The speakers, because I know a lot of the speakers had original research, because I actually got to meet a young man that's originally from Cuba, Sebastian Castro. He was there. He had some Windows security related research that he had done. So there's a lot of original research and top-notch speakers there. So it was a pretty amazing conference.
Yeah, it was nice to have you over, man. Like, so basically, I think you attended the Singapore event, and so like for the listeners and for the viewers, I guess, like essentially we had like a few different types of conferences that we run. So we had like the flagship event, which is called the HITB Security Conference, and that's like a large scale event that we used to do in Amsterdam. Used to be like our largest event. And then we decided, well, we should do something more bespoke. And so we did an event called HITB GSEC. And the difference was that we allowed the audience to kind of choose the talks. So you actually got invited because the audience wanted you there. We decided that since people are paying tickets to attend these kind of things, and then usually not that cheap, we should probably let them have a say in who they're going to see. on stage and what kind of talks they want to listen to. Because yeah, we have a review board, and there are like, Google Project Zero and the who's who of the security industry, folks from Microsoft, and so on and so on. But it's all fine and well, but they might not speak to what you are personally interested in. So if you're buying a ticket, ultimately, I think you should have a say in like what's interesting to you, right? Like for me, like I love AI and all AI stuff. So if I had a choice, I'll be like, yeah, vote for all the AI talks. So we decided to do this different format, and we call it GSEC, where people could vote on the talks, and it was just a different style of event. So a little bit smaller, but perhaps I would say attendee wise engagement would probably be a little bit higher, since everybody kind of like really wanted to be there and wanted to see your talk, right? And everybody else's.
Yeah, it's kinda makes having a n not it makes it to where you really don't have to have a review board having that case because the attendees are the review board.
Well, we still had the review board choose the high level list.
Okay.
So let's just say because it was, I believe it was like a single track conference that we ran for 2 days, if I memory serves me right. Like, so excuse the old man, I might not remember, but I think it was a single track over 2 days. But anyway, which would mean we have like something like, I don't know, let's just say 12 talks, right? So six per day, so six speakers per day. And they would shortlist, say 30 that they felt were worthy, because most of the time we have a ratio of something like between for like the really big Hack in the Box events, it's something like 15 to 20 to 1. So which means 20 submissions to every one slot that we have, which means choosing the talks becomes ridiculous, right? So in Singapore, I think it was a little bit more manageable, something like maybe 8 to 1 or something like that. So they chose the 30 favorite talks that they thought were like worthy of filling the 12 slots or whatever that we had. And then we shortlisted that and provided that list as a shortlisted list for people to vote on, because essentially it's will become overwhelming if we let the audience kind of choose from a list of 100 something talks, because there's lots of overlap, and the nuances in what's different between presentation A and B might not be the best person in order to kind of like pick that out, right? And that's what we have our CFA review board for. So they would choose between like A and B that's talking about the same topic, but which is talking about something that maybe hasn't been fully explored, perhaps. So that would be our choice, because like, it's not been said before, or it's a slightly different angle or slightly different take on the same problem, but approaching it from a different way or a different outlook. So we would say that because talk A perhaps has been presented as black hat, we wouldn't choose talk A, not because it's been presented before, but if talk B brings enough value and enough difference to the table, then it doesn't matter who the speaker is. It's like that point of view, you know what I mean? Even though it might be a bigger speaker in talk A, bigger in the sense of like more famous or has presented many times before. But I guess that's how things stay fresh, and you kind of surface up new talent, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Back to the quality of the conferences, the talks and stuff, it's kinda different because most conferences that I'm used to going to, yeah, there will be some people that has some original research, but that is just not normal, whereas I know the conference I spoke at, Hack in the Box Singapore,
Mm-hmm.
you actually had 2 different tracks. One was like a research track, and the other one was a security track because I did a talk on securing APIs through external attack surface management, but then, like, the other track was, like, research. So
Right.
that's one of the stage that Sebastian spoke on.
Oh, okay, 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 okay. Yeah, I mean, we normally, so that's the thing, when everybody always asks me like, how do I get a speaking slot at Hack in the Box? I'm like, well, submit your best research, and it doesn't really have to be like 0 day level stuff. Of course, we love the 0 day. And we prioritize attack based talks mainly because they're exciting. Not because like we don't think defense is important. For us, like in from an attendee standpoint, like it's exciting to see stuff getting hacked, or you know what I mean. So we always prioritize 0 days. But I always tell folks that like either submit your best research, because at the end of the day, it's not me choosing, and so I might have my own biases of what I think makes a cool talk. But we trust our review board to have a holistic view on where the industry is going, and there's so many folks in our review board anyway, so it kind of balances out anyway that You have some folks that will say like, yeah, this topic has been covered many times before, and others will be arguing for, well, yeah, okay, it has, but this particular portion of the research is novel, and this particular researcher hasn't had stage time. Why not give them an opportunity? And you never know what happens from there, you know what I mean? Because, yeah, there's lots of smart people, you know what I mean? So it's like not everybody might be a household name yet.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is just because someone is well known doesn't always mean that it's the best
Also,
topics they bring, but then again, at the same time, some of these people are well known, they're presenting a lot of these same topics that's been heard, so it's very interesting that you bring in the quality of speaker that you do. So, one of the things that's interesting too, that I just recently noticed was that you have a series of conferences called Out of the Box.
yeah,
So
out of the
what's
box.
what's the difference between Hack in the Box and Out of the
And
Box?
out of the box, yeah. So basically, so Hang the Box, we essentially sold the brand and the business back in like 2018 to the UAE. So anything that happens outside of the UAE, we have to call it something else. And since we are now in a post-COVID era, we were thinking that, looking at the way the conferences are these days and attendees and looking at the next generation, right? And the fact that they grew up living through a pandemic. Some of them graduated remotely, didn't really go to classes, had remote classes. Like the expectation from an attendee for an event is quite different from you and I, who are much older with the gray hair. We had a different need when we went for conferences. It was a different time, right? And now in the post-COVID era, it's like, a lot of things are done remotely. Like even this podcast, for example, right? Like this would probably be something we would have done at a conference in a room, and
Mhm.
having met each other in person and then sat down and had this podcast recorded. But now we're doing everything remotely. I haven't seen you in 3 years. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the younger generation and even attendees want something else because, having lived through a pandemic, you now value your time differently, as in time away from family and time spent on the road, flying, staying in hotels, blah, blah, blah. All the costs have gone up as well. And you weigh all of those things very differently, right? So we were thinking like, well, we have an opportunity to then now have a new brand, and thus create a new experience or something completely different. Why not? I mean, it's like, why do you want to do the same old thing that we've done before? And not to say that we can't do a Hang the Box event anymore. We just do those in UAE, much larger event, and we have the Pro CTF where we invite the top 10 teams from CTF time to come compete. And like, it's like a completely different thing, right? So now we have the flexibility of adding something new. We should, like all good hackers, experiment and try it out and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, what's the worst that can happen anyway, right?
Yeah, and for someone that comes from an offensive security background and really appreciates hacking, I really appreciate conferences that have a lot of focus around hacking and security research because a lot of conferences here in the States are really not so much offensive oriented. There's a lot
Oh,
of stuff around a defense, there's a need for it, but it's for those of us that work on the offensive side really appreciate the hacker conferences because for us there's some around here, but it's just I don't know, there's not as much emphasis, I guess, on some of these conferences on the offensive side or research side.
I guess we grew up differently, right? I mean, we're from a time when we were in exploratory, as in, like, we grew up in a time where you book into a hotel and you start exploring the Wi-Fi. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like normal. It wasn't something that why would you do that? It connects to the internet, you're fine, you can download stuff, right? We're like, no, let's like look at the infrastructure, let's try mapping stuff out, see whether there's any authentication problems, see if we can get into the admin level. Not because we wanted to cause any trouble, but just because we were just curious to see whether we could, right? And so we've always been, I think, offensive focused in that sense. As in, let's see what happens if we poke this thing and will it break, right? And I guess that sense of curiosity, I suppose, still drives a lot of what we do. Even though now we're much older and we're much, I suppose, quote unquote, wiser, uh, in everything that we approach, we kind of approach it with a more sense of play. You know what I mean? In the sense that, like, what's the worst that can happen, bro? Like, just experiment and try, right? Like you can always go back to what worked before anyway, right? Like, but there's no harm in trying something else. What happens when you double space, you know?
It's really interesting how security and the conference scene and hacking in general has evolved because, when we were younger, getting started out, you didn't have bug bounties.
Yeah, no,
So it was
and
yeah,
lots
so
of
you didn't have
better,
those
basically.
opportunities.
Cease and desist, basically, is what gets sent to you, man.
Yeah. And it's interesting too because you mentioned the curiosity because back then people could do things out of curiosity and not really have to worry about repercussions, because a lot of times people were doing it out of curiosity, not malicious intent. So it's just kind of interesting how that's kind of changed nowadays. Security researchers really have to be careful about what they're doing, or they could find themselves in legal trouble.
I don't know, man. I think actually the amount of legal trouble you could find yourself in is probably the same as it was before. It's just that right now, I think people don't share as openly the coolness about it, as in like it always has to be something big, as in, and when it becomes something big, it's more of like, how can I monetize this? It's the question that today people will ask themselves, as in like, if I found a vulnerability in iOS, let's just give an example, right? If I found a zero-click vulnerability in iOS, that's a $10 million exploit, basically. Am I going to drop that knowledge on the internet just for everybody else to enjoy? No, right? Like, even it used to be that, okay, I'll save that knowledge and present it at Black Hat or present it at Hack in the Box or whatever, right? Like, as in, I'll save it for an occasion, a special occasion, right? Now it'll be like, who can I sell it to and who's going to pay me enough for it, right? And can I trust them to actually pay me for it, or are they going to rip me off? That's like today's thinking. So you have folks that are kind of like sitting on knowledge, which in itself is probably not really useful, but when chained with a lot of other stuff can become useful. But nobody wants to share anymore. It's like everybody's keeping all the goodies for themselves, right? Whereas opposed to in the early Dan Kaminsky days, for example, where he was on stage making money spit out of an ATF, right? Those shit days are over, man. Like, we're not going to see that anymore, which is a shame. The days of Hugo Tesso getting up on stage and saying, I can hack a plane, or Jim Giobetti saying, I can take over a satellite and showing it. Not because we can do something with it that's like malicious other than getting free internet, but that was in itself cool. As if we could get free internet, using satellites. Like, wow, man, that's cool, man. When would I use it? I don't know, man, but it's still cool. And those days are over, and that's a shame. That's a crying shame for the younger guys who never got to experience that. The joy of just finding something that you don't think about, like, oh shit, like how much money can I make from this? Is more of like, hey, let me show some guys because this is cool, and this is interesting, and isn't this peculiar? You know what I mean? Like, see what I discovered. You know what I mean? Like, this is cool. This is fun. And it wasn't so much about the bragging rights, which was at some point it was about the bragging rights, and then now it's literally about the money.
So it's more about someone just sharing something, some cool technology, some cool hack that they found,
Mhm.
and instead of just the monetary piece of
Yeah,
it.
and kind of walking you through their thought process, which is like I don't think shown so much these days. People kind of like show the problem and how they approached it, perhaps, and then the exploit, but they don't really show their tool set and their thinking, or what exact the steps, like literally step by step, kind of like walking you through it. Like, where as opposed to kind of like the earlier days, people would actually literally put in your hands, you know what I mean? Like the code and the methodology and how they got to where the solution, as in, it's not just about the solution, but it's the thinking process behind it, the methodology. And I think that's really where the value is, you know what I mean? That's where the knowledge is, you know what I mean? Teaching somebody the trick behind the exploit, you know what I mean? Like, how exactly do you find it? How exactly do you write it? And how did you discover it, right? Like, what made you look in that direction to begin with, right? What was the thing that kind of like jumped out at you that you noticed that other people glossed over? Like, there's so many vulnerabilities these days that, like, in open source software that have been there for like, God knows, like a decade or some shit. Nobody found it. And it's like major ass vulnerability. How the hell did you decide to download this package, look through it, and what is it about it that jumped out at you? Was it a fuzzing tool chain? What is it? Is it like, what's the special sauce, bro? Like, nobody wants to share that knowledge, and that's a shame, because it's
Yeah.
actually like if I was a toolset author and I've written all bunch of like nonsense scripts and shit, if somebody used it and made it better, I would want to know what they did to make it better, and so that I could improve it myself. And so I feel like people are missing out on the kind of like sharing the knowledge in order to move everybody forward, rather than just I win, everybody else just remains stagnant, which is the current status quo. It's a shame, you know what I mean? It used to be that we all move forward together, you know what I mean? I presented at a talk or whatever, and like everybody else kind of like gets access to it and does stuff with it, and it's cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and so I know you've seen, running conferences around the globe like you have. Well, before we started our recording the podcast, you were talking about some people just writing out, exploits and stuff within Notepad with very minimal tools and creating these really cool hacks and stuff, so if you wouldn't mind kinda explaining some of the things you've seen there.
Yeah, I mean, so we're talking like early 2000s, right? So in fact, yeah, it was in 2003. HITB was one of our first speakers that came to our first quote unquote international Hack in the Box that we had in Malaysia. And he presented the Metasploit framework as an idea, as in it wasn't even like, what it is today, right? Which is Rapid7 and blah, 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 right? Like, so, and it was just a framework. And he was poking in, like, God knows what. I think Windows Server 2003 or something like that. And he found a 0-day in it, like live, like, he was just playing around with stuff at the CTF that we had. And he found some vulnerability, and we called Microsoft Malaysia, and it was like cool to see this in action. As in, like, he wasn't safeguarding it. He wasn't saying, "Oh, I'm going to use this to my own advantage and not share it. I found something cool. It's like, you guys can't see about it." He was like, we were literally seeing discovery being made in person, as in like a bug hunter literally like hunting, a hacker doing what he does best. And it was awesome. It's like, and so those early days, and then we had folks like from Vietnam who were playing CDF, and like, they came, that internet access for them came a little bit later. But they were writing exploit code like in the terminal, like shell code, like without using any kind of tool set or compiler or any shit. The guy is just writing like hexa, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? How the fuck do you do that, man? Like, how do you even read it? And he's like, you just read it. It's like English. I'm like, you are different. You and I are not the same, man. You are on some next level, bro. Like,
Yeah, that's really really cool to get to see that and see how things have evolved. So, for someone that wanted to get into security research now, what would you recommend since things have changed so much over the years?
uh, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, honestly, I would say don't. But if you really want to get into security research, or realize that the methodologies and things that you're doing today, fundamentals are probably still important, but essentially the approach to bug hunting is going to change so drastically. I mean, I'm talking AI, obviously, agentic AI, stuff like Expo, HackerOne, number one leaderboard is now AI. So does that mean bug hunting is dead? You know what I mean? Like, why bother hunting bugs manually? Like, people have been evolving obviously to write fuzzing tool chains and stuff like that to help like their workflow. And now AI is just the next iteration in it. So adopt the technologies now rather than later, and kind of like imagine a new paradigm, you know what I mean? Like that everything is agentic, and essentially you are an orchestrator, and you're not actually going to be hunting the bugs by yourself, like literally on the command line. That shit, those days are over, bro. You're gonna have like a couple of agents and like specialized agents that are gonna be able to surface certain bugs. Your job is to direct them so that you don't waste your tokens, which are gonna be expensive, at least for the time being, right? Like, because every context window in AI, and how big the context window is, and how much memory utilization you're using determines the cost of your request, right? So if your prompt isn't succinct, or if your instructions are not tagged sharp, if your agents are not well fine-tuned, you'll end up spending a lot. But essentially, your job is not going to be actually running the fuzzing tools and writing the exploits for the offsets. You're going to have to be thinking bigger picture and how systems interconnect and how like exploits can surface not because of a technicality but usually because of a design flaw. Most often than not, AIs might still be building most of the back end stuff, but there's still going to be humans connecting the shit together, and people inherently make mistakes. So that would be my advice. Look,
Yeah, kind of thinking along that lines of that, do you think using like AI to vibe code, do you think it's really going to drastically increase like the bugs and the insecurity out there?
I don't know about the bugs per se, although we have seen a lot of examples recently about like certain apps and services that have gotten compromised, and obviously the joke is that it must be a vibe coded app. Whether that's true or not, I would say to a certain extent, yes. If you have somebody who is not a developer, who doesn't understand the programmatic nature of computers, in the sense that normally you, as a programmer, you would approach a problem and chunk it, as in like look at it in like smaller subsystems and smaller sub problems that need to be solved, and kind of like a flow of like top down or whatever it is, and we would think of things in a logical manner. And as long as you are a designer or have developed software before, you probably will not encounter these vibe coded bugs because you would have prompted it in such a way that you would have been succinct in the fact that you would have taken into consideration that certain actions need to be performed server side, not client side. So do not expose this API key. Do not, the simple as mistakes that an AI would make if you just ask for a POC, which is a completely different thing from a production app. Like, sure, we're making it work in your laptop and like on your little small, demo is all fine and well. But then pushing that code to production that's where the problem becomes, because it's like you're not thinking of like, but what happens when RLS only takes care of the row, but you need access control to the column? Then you need an app secret, and you cannot use it in like a client side exposed API. Like it needs to be completely server side, right? Shit like that. As in, if you've never encountered those problems before and you try and vibe code something, then yeah, of course your app is going to be like hacked like day after tomorrow. You know what I mean? But you'll learn. So it's not the end of the world. You won't be the first person to get hacked anyway. So, don't feel bad. If shit breaks, just fix it. I think it's the more of, I think what makes hackers different from everybody else is resilience and our willingness to not give up and not say, oh, this shit doesn't compile, so fuck this shit, I'm going to watch Netflix. But actually figuring it out and making it work, right? And I think that sets us apart. As in, that's what makes us different. As in, that's what makes hackers different, right? Is that not giving up, resilience.
Yes. It's that persistence for
Persi-
stubbornness because
Exactly.
I got my start like a lot of folks in security and IT. And I remember I'd be working and people say, "You're really patient." And said, "Nah, I'm stubborn." It's like I
Yeah,
got to solve this problem.
exactly. When somebody says it cannot be done, I'm like, hold my coffee. Are you sure? Let me try. You know what I mean? And I guess that
Yeah.
like in a way, it's not that burn and that fire. I don't think it's dead. I do see that still alive in a lot of the younger guys. In a lot of like I've been to conferences in Kazakhstan, for example. So and it's completely different vibe from anything that we have in Europe or North America or even in Asia. And like that fire of like, hold my beer, let me show you, is still alive and well. So I'm not I'm still quite hopeful that that hacker spirit of like let me show you, and I don't believe you, and I'm gonna try it myself just to satisfy my own curiosity. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, it doesn't matter, but I'm gonna try it myself. And that stubbornness or that resilience to learn something, even if it's like quote unquote difficult, is not dead. So that gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, that's good. And one of the things I think that people should take in consideration is there's conferences are great, but there's also when the conferences are not going on, there's still community out there that you can
Yeah,
uh, share with and collaborate and learn from.
100%. And I think like a lot of people shouldn't be so afraid of putting themselves out there. I mean, like now that I'm older, when I was younger, right? So a lot of times I would build something and I'll be like, nah, I'm not gonna share this with anybody. It's silly. You know what I mean? It's just a nonsense app, right? But Now I'm older and I don't give a shit. So I feel some nonsense there, but I just put it on GitHub anyway, right? And people download it, they pocket and they star it and they write to me and say like, hey, it was cool, it's good, it helped me, or like, whatever, I used it for something. And that to me in itself is worth the effort then, you know what I mean? So don't prejudge what you're working on, because to you're so deep in it and you're so entrenched in it that it seems simple. But to somebody else who's from the outside, like we were talking earlier, and you asked me, like, do you know much about IoT stuff? I was like, I know some, but like, I'm not an expert. Because I don't spend that much time in that area. So for somebody who works in IoT, they might be working on something and they'll be like, this is simple shit, bro. Like everybody knows this, right? And like, I don't. So
Yeah.
somebody else might not either. So, just put it out there, upload a YouTube video, write a blog post, make a tweet, whatever it is, whatever floats your boat, whatever medium that you think works best. Just share it, because ultimately that's all there is, man. Life is short, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, don't silo stuff and don't keep stuff on your hard drive. Like musicians always say, don't keep your music on your hard drive. Like, just release it. Like, put it up on YouTube or put it up wherever, right? Like, let people listen to it. And it's not your job is not to decide whether people will like it or not. Your job is just to put it out there anyway. Because, like, where does the information come from anyway, right? Where does inspiration come from? Where does knowledge come from? Where do we find exploits? Like, where does I think this would be how I'm going to solve this problem. Where does that inspiration come from? Who the fuck knows, man? But it comes from somewhere, but it certainly didn't come
Yeah.
from Saiju. So take it, process it, and put it back out, is my take.
Yeah. I love your comments on the sharing thing because that's one of the things that we can do at any level, beginner to, someone that's been in this for a long time is just sharing information. Doesn't matter because I learned so much from my students when I taught at Dallas College. I taught pen testing.
Mhm.
You had people coming in brand new that they were finding new resources that some of us veterans didn't know about because we'd been in it for a while. We weren't looking for educational stuff, but they learned this stuff and shared it with us all the way. And so it's one of the things I always like to share with people who've been doing this for a while. Don't underestimate the new folks. They're finding some really cool stuff.
Precisely. Like, I was like getting into, we're talking about vibe coding. So I was getting into vibe coding stuff, and it's like all of these new frameworks and all of this new, like, I'm from like C, COBOL, C++. So like, old school PHP is probably the most quote unquote modern language that I've last coded in by hand, as in manually. And then now it's Next.js and it's whatever the fuck Rails and, Redis and all sorts of other shit on top of it, super base. And you're like, what the fuck is all this shit, man? And like, so, having to learn something from scratch, it's like, it's always interesting, and like, so there's always something new to learn. And like, I always feel like there's never, if you find something interesting, it's somebody else is probably going to encounter the same difficulty that you had as well. You know what I mean? And so if you can help somebody out, and even if it seems trivial, you never really know the trickle on effect, or like pebble in a lake effect, or whatever it is, right? Like, as in the ripple effect, right? Like, so what might happen from you just sharing that piece of knowledge, and who you might meet, and friends you might make. um so yeah, I think the younger generation just needs to kind of like share more. Don't care less about what people think, because honestly, people don't think about anything. You know what I mean? They don't think about you as much as you think. You're not the lead role in their life, man. You're only the lead role in your own life. So don't overthink it. Just like put stuff out there. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I spoke to a bunch of university students in Kazakhstan, and they were like, so what do you think we should do next? And I'm like, what do you should do next? I'm like, well, whatever it is that's interesting to you today, it doesn't matter how basic it is or whatever it is, but whatever it is that you're kind of like, man, this is cool, and like, I'm going to spend this weekend reading about it or learning about it, write a blog post about it, or record a video if you that's your medium and you like it, record a TikTok if you like, explaining it, because you'll probably end up realizing that you're actually absorbing the knowledge a lot better by trying to explain it to somebody else. And if you surprise yourself, like, just by reading it, you might find like, oh yeah, I understand this shit. But when you try to explain it to somebody else and you have to try and recall all of the stuff that you read, you make connections to certain topics or certain areas or certain viewpoints that you might not have stumbled across just by passively reading it. So try that out and see how that works out for you. Would be my advice to them.
Great advice. It was great chatting with you today. It's been too long, and hopefully we get to see each other in person again sometime soon. But thanks for joining. And where can people find you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at leapdog, so L333DAWG. Or you can search for my name, which has a very long last name, on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. But essentially, if you try hard enough, you'll find me without much trouble.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you for having me, brother. I hope to see you at Bangkok next year, and tell Chris you should come along as well. So, we'll hang out
Yeah,
together.
will do. Thanks.
Man. Take care, brother. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Phosphorus IoT Security Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, check out phosphorus.io. At phosphorus.io, you can find more podcast episodes, white papers on IoT security, as well as blog posts and other information to help you secure your OT and IoT infrastructures.